Hi, welcome to the class. This should be pretty fun, I think, as a class. I mean, fun for us, not fun for any really of the historical actors. But before we get started on the Crusades proper, the first several weeks of the class, the first several units here are going to be organized in building our context. Now, as a historian, of course, I'm a big believer in context. I think it's essential to understand anything. But I realize I might have to convince you somewhat because maybe you're not as weird as me. I don't know. Well, here's where it is. Context is useful for us in understanding the crusading mentality, and I think you will come to appreciate along with me how fundamentally strange it was that people acted the way they did, how they did, in the times and particular manners in which they did. I don't think it's easily explained, and to understand how we get from, say, the early roots of Christianity, the early roots of Islam, the sort of sociocultural worlds that we see emerging in the wake of the fall of Rome, this medieval trajectory that gets set doesn't seem to lead toward the Crusades in any particular meaningful way. So I think that requires explanation. And that'll be the focus in a lot of ways of the first third of this class, just getting us to the First Crusade, getting through the details of the First Crusade, and breaking down how that happens. And then from there, we'll see the evolution of crusading throughout time, its reception, its long-term effects, all of which I think are quite fascinating. Hopefully you will too. But there's more that the Crusades can tell us, that, or rather the context of the Crusades can tell us that's rather important, I think. And that's what the Crusades were not. See, there's in this, as in so many other aspects of medieval history, pre-modern history, you might say history at all, a pretty wide divide between popular understandings of the Crusades and historical realities. And for the Crusades in particular, I think that this has been rather harmful, rather profound in its impacts. I mean, one need only look at the deployment of the crusading imagery and language in the racial riots in Charlottesville, where the white nationalist movement co-ops crusade imagery for their purposes and medieval imagery more broadly, or the application of crusading images and language by Islamist groups like ISIS or Al Qaeda, which readily pull from this imagery. So I'm hopeful that this class can prove useful to you in understanding those things, and for this, the context really does matter. You see, the popular understanding of the Crusades, as I so often hear it, are that it's some kind of inevitable conflict between Christianity and Islam, or more broadly, between East and West, that is born out of some kind of inevitable and intense mutual religious antagonism, leading to, or at least with the objectives of mutual destruction, forced conversion for purely religious motives, or perhaps most ridiculously, revenge, as it were. Interesting narrative, but it all breaks down in light of the sort of context we're going to see over the next few weeks. As you'll see, the Crusades were by no means inevitable. In fact, as I've already alluded, they were downright surprising, downright weird, requiring explanation. Uh, the Islamic world, the Latin Christian world, the Greek Christian world, and those two have recently become rather distinct as of the beginning of the First Crusade. These are worlds that were, for the most part, at peace, that had mostly positive relations, admittedly with significant bursts of violence under specific categories, under specific contexts, rather. But that is not the sort of explanation that can work for us. Some kind of teleology saying Christianity and Islam were just fundamentally opposed and, they had to wipe each other out doesn't explain the centuries of mostly positive coexistence between the two cultures leading up to this point. Something much deeper than that is required. Even more absurd are assertions of, mutual destruction, which was never the aim of any of the Crusades, mutual forced conversion, or Christians trying to convert Muslims by force, which was never the aim of any crusade to the Islamic world. Now, as we'll see, crusading comes to encompass a much wider definition, and there were indeed some crusades that were aimed at forced conversion to pagan groups, or debatably, depending on how you look at it, heterodox Christian groups in Europe. But those, as we'll see, follow something of a different pattern. So no, not forced conversion, not mutual destruction, but rather, while religion played an important role, specific strategic objectives, for the most part, informed by religion, and perhaps, debatably, caused principally by religion, but not with any aim towards destruction or conversion as such. And most ridiculous of all, this picture of an East versus West kind of clash, which is maybe the most harmful reception in the modern understanding of the Crusades of all. Fundamentally, this was a conflict between sibling cultures. Three cultures, really, the principal actors involved here: the Latin West, Byzantium, the Islamic world. We're going to trace the origins of each of those groups and of Christianity and Islam more broadly over the following weeks, partially with the aim of showing you their overlap, their similarities. These were all three inheritors of a shared tradition, the Roman tradition, and they're kind of the descendants of Rome in a pretty direct sort of way, which may surprise you, but I'll elaborate how the Islamic world fits into the Roman tradition a little more specifically in Unit 3. For now, though, our focus will be on the origins of Christianity, which is important to understand the sort of trajectory that has to happen in the evolution of Christianity to get us to a place where the Crusades are even possible, and then the sort of transformation of Rome into these three component cultures. And after that, we'll pick up the thread looking specifically at early Islam in the Islamic world, and then turn our attention back to Western Europe, the Latin West, to understand a little more of how the Crusades could break out. And then finally, after that, the actual immediate origins of the Crusade and the Crusade itself. So hold on to your seat. There's going to be a lot of context. And if that doesn't make you as happy as it makes me, well, I'm sorry, but you're just not as important, Josh. All right. Have a good one.